Hi, I'm Shelley Wood. You might know me from shelleywood.com. This is my tiny sewing room where I make doll clothes sewing videos. Today I'm going to show you how to make a shirt for male dolls or action figures. This shirt has front pockets and a folded sleeve that uses a little tab with a button. Today's free pattern will fit your G.I. Joe action figures, the WWE Action Figures, and similar sized dolls. If you go with gingham, you'll get a kind of Western look, or you could have a solid fabric for a more traditional shirt. This is supposed to look like my dad's Navy Petty Officer shirt. Before we begin, please go to shelleywood.com to download this free printable sewing pattern. Use the pattern to cut out these gingham pieces. Now, if you're going to do the solid one, you could use blue fabric for those pieces, but you'll also need white cotton lining pieces like you see here. Set one of your lining fronts on top of the lining back and sew across the shoulder seam. Now you'll see I'm using red thread so you can see it better, but I recommend white. Set the other lining front on top of your shirt's lining back. Sew across this shoulder seam the same way you did the other one. Set the lining aside for a moment and we'll just work with a pocket. Fold one of the pockets in half like you see me doing here. Sew along one side and then all along that pointed bottom. Clip all seams. I like to use a chopstick or a bamboo knitting needle to help me get down inside those tight corners when I'm inverting something like a tiny pocket. You'll see me doing that here with a chopstick. Gently push the raw fabric edges inside the pocket, so you'll see we didn't sew this side, so we need to push that inside, and then we're going to whip stitch along the edge to close it off. Fold the top of the pocket down. Press your fold to hold that top part in place, and then sew top stitching all around the pocket. Sew a couple of stitches across the flap. Now, to determine where the pocket will be stitched onto the shirt front, this is what I recommend. Use a dark pen to mark the pattern itself, then set the fabric on top and mark it with a fabric pin. Pin your pocket in place where you've marked. Now, I'm using a teeny tiny sewing machine, so I have to roll and pin the bottom part of the shirt. But now I'm ready to stitch along the sides and bottom of the pocket. And you'll see me doing that there. Sew one or both pockets to the gingham fronts. You can choose just one. You can stitch your pocket by hand, but like you can see on the navy shirt, it does kind of turn out a little bit lumpy if you do it by hand. Maybe I'm just not as talented as some people. If you sew two pockets, make sure they line up. Now let's lay one of the outer fronts on top of the outer back. So now we're just working with the gingham. Sew across the shoulder here. I am using white thread, so it's a little tricky to see. Follow the same steps for the other front and back. So you lay that across and then stitch it up. Hopefully you've already attached your pocket. Lay the whole gingham piece out flat. so that you can press the shoulder seams open. And here I am doing that. There is a difference between ironing and pressing, so look in the links in the description for that. You'll want to do the same thing for your lining, open it up and then give it a nice press. Okay, now you should have two pieces, one white, one gingham. Flip them over so you're looking at the right sides, and then lay one on top of the other with right sides facing, and that means that you are able to see the seams. Sew around the front closure area and what you might think of as a hem. You'll be sewing in a sort of L-shaped pattern. And here I am doing that so you can see what I mean by that L shape. Follow these directions for both the right front and the left front. Now your garment looks like this. You want to clip all seams. Be careful not to cut through the seams. It's easy to do, everybody's done it. Okay, and do that to both fronts. Now once again, I like to use a chopstick to help me get those corners nice and sharp. When you turn your garment right side out, use some kind of a turning tool. Chopsticks are great to get those corners tight. Press the front closure and the what you think of as a hem area. Now your garment looks like this. Lay the sleeve alongside your underarm area. Stitch from where the fabrics meet at the underarm to just 1 centimeter shy of that shoulder seam. You want to stop there and tie your knot. Here's a quick video showing me stitching. I like to do my sleeves by hand. Now flip your sleeve around and attach it to the other underarm, and here's what I mean by that. So here you have your garment, the sleeve's attached on one side but not the other side, so you flip that sleeve around, bring the two underarms together and begin stitching there. So you sew from this underarm to just 1 centimeter shy of the shoulder yet again before you tie your knot. So this is just like we did on the other side. Now your sleeve is still not fully attached because there's still a slight gap at the shoulder. And I even inserted my little finger through so you could see what I mean. Run a gather stitch along the sleeve's very top. And then you're going to attach the sleeve to the shoulder once you've had a gather that makes it match up nice. Now your garment looks like this on one side and it looks like this on the other side. So this is the right side. Follow the same steps to attach the other sleeve. Instead of hemming this sleeve, you're going to fold it first once and then a second time toward the right side of the sleeve. So again, you're folding it toward the gingham side. Now from the wrong side of the garment, you're going to send a needle and thread through these folds of the cuff and make a couple of knots to just kind of hold that cuff in place. Follow these directions for both your sleeves, and then we're ready to work with the tabs. Now the tabs are kind of tiny, so it takes dexterous fingers, but fold in one end and then fold one long side in and then fold the other long side in. And then finally you're going to fold the whole thing in half. Now I've got a video to show you, so you do the end, the side, the other side, and then fold the whole business in half. Whip stitch along the edges of this sleeve tab. You can see my whip stitch. When you get to the other end of your tab, you're going to want to fold that in as well. And then just continue whip stitching along the edges until you're done. Follow these steps for both the sleeve tabs. Attach one of the sleeve tabs right where the sleeve and the shoulder seam meet up. Here's a little video showing me doing that. So I'm attaching the sleeve tab at one end to where the sleeve and the shoulder seam of the shirt meet up. Flip the other end of the tab around that cuff that you secured. So we're going to flip it over. And then from the underside, you saw in that clip, I'm attaching the tab to the sleeve with a single stitch to hold it in place. Now I sewed a button on for realistic effect. You'll want to follow these steps for both sleeves. And then we're going to work with the collar. So lay your collar against the front, keeping right sides together, with about 5 millimeters of collar overhanging the front. Insert your needle through the gingham front and through the collar, but do not go through the lining. Sew the gingham collar to the gingham shirt neck without ever sending the needle through the lining until you come to the end. And then you tie your knot. Now I actually had to redo mine because I didn't have enough of an overhang. You should have a 5 millimeter overhang on both sides. Sometimes if you cut the fabric, it might be more like a 4 millimeter overhang. And this video shows what I mean by don't sew through the lining, okay? So you can see me inserting my finger in there between the gingham and the lining while I work to keep me from sewing the collar to the lining. You can see those fingers go in between. Now your collar should look like this. At this point, you're going to fold each overhanging bit of the collar in and then fold the collar along its length, first once and then a second time, keeping those ends tucked in tight. So here I am doing that. I fold it once and then a second time. And then I start to send my needle through. You're going to whip stitch or slip stitch like we saw in the video on Friday. You can slip stitch the collar to the lining but not the outer fabric. And make sure you tuck both ends of the collar in as you're working. Don't leave any bits of collar hanging out because it will look funny. Close up the sides of the collar. And I used a whip stitch, but you could use a slip stitch. Now your garment looks like this. Fold your garment in half at the sleeve. Once again, you can see I'm right sides together, so the gingham touches the gingham on the front and back. And you're going to stitch from the cuff to the underarm, and then from the underarm to just shy of the front's so-called hemmed edge. About 1 centimeter before you get to the bottom, you want to stop and tie your knot. Fold and stitch both side seams like this, stopping 1 centimeter before you get to the bottom. Now separate the back and front, and then tuck the raw fabric of the back inside itself, both the lining and the gingham. Whip stitch along the bottom of this, closing off all these raw edges of the back. Then you're ready to close off the side seams with a little stitch, and you'll stitch from your previous knot to the garment's actual edge, closing side seams on both sides. Now you're ready to invert the garment. It's getting exciting. It's starting to look like a shirt. I didn't have to use my chopstick for this because it's a little bigger shirt than some dolls would have. Add some snaps as a closure, and maybe sew a few buttons down the front for a realistic look. For more free printable sewing patterns, for dolls and action figures of many shapes and all different sizes, remember to visit my website, shelleywood.com. Well, that's all I have for you today. Thanks for watching. If you like my videos and all my free patterns on my website, please share them on your favorite social media platforms. It actually helps my website grow if you spread the word. Goodbye.